Far away in a long-forgotten land called Jalapeno, there was a small company called From Software. This company has just released a janky PS1 launch title. While ultimately a valiant first attempt, the early days of the PS1 could not hold the ambition of the title, and led to a poor frame rate, confusing map design, and chronic what the fuck am I doing disorder. However, it was still a charming and atmospheric title. It was not easily forgotten. This must have been the salvation of the franchise, because From Software had managed to secure enough sales for an even bigger undertaking. They wanted to go bigger, they wanted to be even more ambitious, and for this very task, they wanted to go international. With the assistance of the ill-fated ASCII Entertainment, we step away from the land of Verdite and onto the island of Melanat for King's Field 2. After giving the first King's Field the proper look it deserved, naturally King's Field 2 was going to be my next pick, how could it not? What I wasn't expecting under any circumstance was the fact that King's Field 2 is indeed the template for the modern From Software games you know and love today. I think of all games, if you were to trace the bloodline of Dark Souls all the way down to its basin, you'd probably find the first American FromSoft title ever produced, flowing the lifeblood of the Soulslike franchise. Now, is it a proper Souls experience? No, but I'll have to explain that later. The funny thing about King's Field 2 is that it has so much of King's Field's 1 DNA firmly entrenched in its genetic code, and there's no reason to go over all the minutiae again. If you played King's Field 1, and I know if you're watching this you probably haven't, you'll feel right at home all over again. We don't need a ton of build-up or backstory. If you want to know what's what and the details of like the combat and the whatnot, well, watch the first video, you dingus. At the end of the first game, Jean Alfred Forrester had killed the big bad brother of the king, stopped the demons inside the royal catacombs, and became an unmatched swordsman of the Kingsfield School of Chopping Things, and a fairly powerful magic user. For his efforts, he was actually greatly rewarded as he became the goddamn king of Verdite, which Kingsfield 2 helpfully pronounces so I can stop sounding like an idiot. So our bodiless boy was moving up in the world until out of nowhere, someone nicks the Moonlight Sword and takes off to the island of Melanat, a reportedly cursed island where the monsters supposedly roam from and no one can return from once they step foot on the island. A monument to the newly introduced elves said a great ship crashed into the island, and now a sleeping evil awaits deep inside. While the Moonlight Sword is missing, the other countries neighboring Verdite have been under attack, and it won't be long until the monsters are knocking on Jean's door. And just as damning, the monsters are supposedly coming from Melanat itself. Since Jean is currently preoccupied by, running a whole ass kingdom, a good friend of his, Alexander, goes in his stead and like an idiot gets a shipwreck and must figure out how to progress while trapped onto the island. Now, interestingly, I was going to recommend the manual, since it goes into greater detail about the plot, except the story is a massive contradiction. It says that Jean went to Melanat to find his father, but instead he killed the old evil king of Verdite and found the Moonlight Sword there. Except Kingsfield 1 says that's not what happened. He did find his father, albeit dead. He didn't kill the king, he killed his brother, and all of what happened was claimed in the manual happened in the catacombs of Verdite, not Melanat. One fucking game in, and we already have retcons. To be honest, I can excuse the mistake. After all, the first game never released here, so ASCII probably made up some bullshit story, kinda like the first game, to satisfy a backstory, but that does mean finding out what is canonical and what isn't in the plot is a bit confusing for right now. However, we do get a lot of backstory, including the fall of the elves, the mysterious King Harvite who once ruled all of the land but fell to the attacking monsters of Melanat, and the 2 supposed gods of this island. We have Gyra, the black, evil dragon god, and you're not gonna fucking believe this when I tell you. The good white dragon god is Seath. Yes, Seath, you heard that right. One of the most despicable and possibly one of the only truly evil characters in Dark Souls lore in Seath the Scaleless is the resident patron deity. Wrap your head around that one. I know that they are separate characters and whatnot, separated by decades, but come on, that complete 180 is too funny to ignore. The plot in the game itself is told through the environment and NPCs as FromSoft norm. The high amount of NPCs and environmental detail actually tell a somewhat interesting plot, unlike the first game, which was pretty much just go here, kill bad guys, find dad. For you see, the first humans you see in the game are dressed like guardsmen of some sort and attack you on sight. So you may be a bit confused on why some attack and some don't. Turns out your journey to recover the Moonlight Sword will be put on hold because some dickwad named Necron has set up shop to stop people from reaching the deepest parts of the island. And he's enforcing his rule on the local citizens, so they have to obtain crystals for some reason. If they don't, they starve to death, and if they resist, they die. So now your goal is to try and get past all of Necron's traps, power yourself up, and reach the deepest part of the island to take him down and retrieve the sword. What's interesting is that Necron is apparently a very recent villain, and minor spoilers, was once just a normal villager who's corrupted. He's even making his own demon army just to try to keep the island. Of course, he's not the main bad guy because there's still plenty of space for a plot twist. A plot twist is kinda easy to guess. I mean, people practically suck Cease cock in this game like it's a bad dragon, but this Gyra is spoken about like he's Satan, and since he's introduced in this game, guess who's controlling the whole operation? I mean, fuck's sake, he's on the box. Do I need to spell it out for you? I won't show him in this game nor the final map because it's honestly a bit of a really cool twist, but the ending is mostly satisfying and I didn't feel like my time was wasted at any point. The plot was not a kick in the balls. Well, after we study the plot, we pop the game into our totally legit PS1, have plenty of recording software, and assault the power button. First off, I swear the voice acted ASCII entertainment jump scares me every time, and oh, look at the baby from Software logo. This is the most 90s company thing I can think of, and I live for it. After that, you get beautiful PS1 full motion video and voice dialogue. Don't get used to them because they don't appear until the game ends, but at least it makes for a very atmospheric entrance for sure. And we actually have a full-blown title screen. I mean, sure, it's just a still image and the most basic new game load game imaginable here, but it's something. And okay, I kinda lied, we do get to finally see our protagonist here. For this animation, keep it in the back of your mind because it's a fucking lie, we'll get back to this. So after we start a new game, we get almost as cold as an opening as the first Kingsfield, so I move in. Whoa! Alexander can actually move. If that's the case, what if I press whoa? Yes! Yes, FromSoft! Alexander doesn't meander along like Jean, he can actually move. He can actually move so fast he can make small jumps even. That's a little bit neat compared to Jean and his hit and edge and fall to his death personality from the first game. Although then, FromSoft plays a goddamn joke by making the entire opening area nearly a death trap by surrounding it with water that will drown you if you go into it. Like for the lighter colored stuff that you can stand on. And hey, there's a different attack animation based on your weapon. It doesn't happen for most of the weapons, but it's something. Now the core of Kingsfield is still here. You want to keep your distance from enemies, approach their blind spots, whack them when your power is full. I'm not going to give a comprehensive breakdown of everything all over again. We still have issues with figuring out stats and what items do sometimes, but that can be figured out later. Now I'll get to that last part. New to this version of Kingsfield is that weapons finally have different ranges, which means that your piddly little dagger does jack and shit until you touch monsters, but hey, with your new mobility, combat is a bit easier. Something else I noticed is that Alexander isn't able to learn spells naturally like Jean can. He has to go around and pick up these elemental crystals, and those will teach him these spells, which means you can actually get a pretty crazy spell list going if you know where to go early. However, again, at this point, magic is a bit of a rare research, so watch it. The outside areas where you probably biff it the first time, so you still notice there's no load screen. You gotta manually do it from the pause menu again, which is strange because we have a load menu on the main menu, but goddammit, FromSoft. You'll also encounter your first boss monster here, the giant Kraken. Yes, there are many more bosses all over this game, and we'll get back to that once we get the basics down. For now, exploration should be your top priority, and thankfully, exploration is seamless. Kingsfield 2 never needs to load once you've loaded in the first time. The only way you'll ever know if you change the area is the music will take a while to shift. That means that the island of Melanat is one giant interconnected map with nothing aside from a few PS1 styled loading hiding tools to stop your path. Once you've nearly completed the game, you can walk all the way from the little peninsula you start off on, all the way to the final boss without so much as a loading screen. This is insanely impressive for PS1 standards. Not even Symphony of the Night could do this without freezing a little bit at those hallways. Speaking of, this lends the game a bit of a Metroidvania flair. Since everything is interconnected, you'll likely run into a bunch of areas you can't unlock yet and must return with a new key and item. Unfortunately, this comes at the cost to the frame rate. Alexander is much faster than his predecessor, but the system he is on is not, and methinks From Software's ambition was larger than their technical prowess. While the game on the whole is a lot faster than Kingsfield 1, there will be times when the frame rate tanks to even lower than Kingsfield 1 ever reached, especially when there's a lot of enemies on the screen or if you're in one of the towns. It turns an already slow game into a slog sometimes, and you'll want to avoid big fights not out of fear of getting killed, because you're suddenly in are these even frames per second. Those new frame rate issues might have to do with the new and improved graphics and animations. Now people somewhat look like people. I can tell what things are, and there's generally nothing you look at and go like, the fuck is that? Ever again. There's still no blood, but enemies are a lot more expressive when attacking or being hit, so that the problem from the first game where they just jitter around a little bit no longer happens. You'll always know when you did damage. This, does mean that some animations are a bit silly. But for the most part, all of it is a plus across the board. Something else I notice is the variety in this game. As the opening shot shows, you're no longer stuck under crushing darkness and claustrophobic hallways. Oh yes, there'll be plenty of that, but now there's the warm, dark outside of the island, big creepy castles, and towns actually bathed in daylight. Yes, 70% of the game is gray or brown brick, but this means that the old problem of KF1 is no more. Areas look and feel distinct enough that I actually memorized the map in my head, and pulling up the map to figure out where I was going was no longer a concern. It actually makes you want to explore more just to see what weird, bizarre PS1 stuff you can find and what new items and stuff you can find. So what about that exploration, huh? Well, because the island is interconnected, there's a lot more ground to cover. Get it? First off, we have a ton more NPCs and characters in the last game. While in KF1 you'll only meet a human here or there, you'll encounter whole cities of them here. It puts in place that you're not the only person here, and that many more people shipwrecked or brought here and are just trying to live their lives, deal with a shitty situation. People keep talking about things that you'll eventually find: the Elf Shrine, their graves, the Termite Cave, King Harvine's castle. The music also helps continue this feeling of wonder and terror, because we've graduated from Doom midis to Build Engine midis. Kind of. Kingsfield 2 is wonderful at making areas feel that much more terrifying than they really are, and he used to make noises that give me the creeps despite not being anywhere near as deadly. And while I don't think the music is that good nor bad, I have to take time away to actually play it for you, it is really well composed. Ultimately, I think this is a necessary evil because Kingsfield 2, despite trying to ratchet the challenge up a little bit, it's ultimately easier than the first. Kingsfield 2 is a decently challenging game, but not one I think that'll give anyone dedicated to beating it too much trouble. It's nowhere near as cryptic or as punishing as something even like Dark Souls in my eyes. This boils down to 3 new systems. The new Elemental Crystal system means you can get your hands on healing and hard-hitting spells pretty early on. Now, be careful, because just because they're more powerful doesn't mean they're any less deadly even to you. New to this game to make it a little easier are the new save spots, which, while being miles slower than Kingsfield 1, now have these tiny little pedestals. Through the game you'll find 3 keys: Sun, Moon, and Star, and something called a gate, which means you'll find the Sun Gate, Moon Gate, and Star Gate. And these work kinda like bonfires in that you can use them for limited fast travel. Place a key down, and for 10 MP you can teleport to the save point with the respective gate. This allows you to almost always have a safety net of some sort. A crafty player can also abuse the mechanics of the game to get certain weapons or items far earlier than they were supposed to, while you think it would be out of reach. For example, at one point you could see a grave far below you with a katana. This weapon is actually one of the 4 elemental swords, and they are top of their class. And this is roughly right at the halfway point of the game. If you take a running leap off, and if you have enough health, you can land on the island, nab this powerful katana, and get back with the gate. and one of those keys is just outside this game's respective dragon fountain, also known as Cease Fountain in this game. Now initially this place, unlike the last game, just heals your health, but by finding dragon stones, one of which you'll probably run into on the way here, you'll be able to restore magic, cure yourself of poison, which you'll probably have done with the goddamn magic anyways, but once you do this, you'll also be able to take a sip from the center fountain and do all three at once. There's also the second location on an island, so you can heal up there as well. Or don't bother, because this game brings in the crystal flask system. These are portable flasks that you can fill with any of the 4 liquids mentioned above and take them with as potions on the go, which feels eerily like the Estus flasks, minus not replenishing MP or curing poison. You can also carry a ridiculous amount of flasks, since you'll find crystals, which can be made into flasks, so if you're in any danger you can just shotgun a bunch of potions to heal up, top off your magic, and cure poison in one fell swoop. The new combat potential is much appreciated as well. You have new spells, but many of them can hurt you if you're too reckless. Special mention goes to Lightning Bolt and Waterfall. Still, of course, throwing boulders at skeletons is always good fun, and the MP cost is generally higher to compensate for you being able to heal MP at almost all times. Some spells do colossal damage, and some do pretty simple things such as freeze enemies in place. Not damaging, mind, but you get free damage for not that much effort. Something completely new is ranged weapons. You get a bow and something called an arbalist I never found. However, both kinda suck. They do high damage, but take so long to draw, and their velocity is pretty slow, since you still look up and down with the triggers. Aiming is kind of hard. Ironically, it's best on stationary targets, though one thing a bow shouldn't be used on. At least I think. You also now get your hands on two-handed weapons, and these actually end up slowing down your magic regeneration speed along with the last spell you used, of course, instead of just slashing your magic power, which is a nice choice that allows you to fire off a spell here and there and keep the damage while focusing on attacking with melee weapons. Something that was pretty necessary, finally. Everything you pick up in the game world has a purpose and is balanced for the most part. No longer will you go into a certain chest halfway through the game and pick up something game-breaking that seemingly has no purpose in this world other than to be broken as hell. Even the all-consuming Shinden that I mentioned earlier, that's only really good if you're doing slash damage. If an enemy resists or outright ignores that, you're up shit creek without a paddle. It's not one weapon to rule it all anymore. You'll never have something like the Triple Fang incident all over again. These stats did exist in the first game, but since all the weapons had the same animation, none of them felt unique enough to care about. But now, skeletons don't take a ton of damage from cutting weapons, but smashing them with an axe or a hammer does the job pretty damn well. Flying enemies don't take as much damage from wind attacks, etc, etc. As for plot significance, there are now one NPC who will give you basic Souls-like descriptions for all of your weapons, most of your items now. She appears in an empty corner of every town in the game. Unfortunately, she's a bit rare, but she'll list off what every item in the game does and the plot significance of the item if it has one. So the basic sword and shield she won't talk much about, but for the awesome flame sword or Shinden, she'll be more than happy to let you know that you're carrying around a weapon of mass magical destruction. However, this isn't to say that Kingsfield 2 is easy. For as much as you've grown, so have your enemies. Magic isn't exclusive to you, some of your foes have it too, and it hurts. These early in-game slug enemies would probably kill you stone dead if you get caught in their little magic beam, and if not, still deal insane amounts of magic damage. This turns a late game area, the Cave of the Magi, into fucking time crisis just because you need to duck in and out of cover and return fire so much. Certain enemies can just shoot you with basic arrows, whittling you down before you can even retaliate, and certain enemies will just paralyze you out of nowhere, leaving you to get chomped to death, leaving you to use the Bloodstone, which now has the use of curing all status ailments except for poison. These little stone head things fire fast, and their fireballs hit hard without fire protection. I didn't even know you could kill them until I dealt with their bullshit for far too long. There are even the dreaded mimics in this game. They won't kill you stone dead for opening them, which is good, but they release a skeleton, which if you saw the KF1 video, you know, is bad. Something that is both cool and annoying is that certain enemies will have multiple body parts to hit, so you could just end up lopping off their tails so they can still fight, or you'll need to aim for their head to do any real damage. And just to rub salt in the wound further, the game will absolutely let you sell impossible to buy gear and key items, and you'll be forced to buy them back at a premium just to get the privilege of using it again. And Unlike the first game that just hid all of its best equipment behind the dragon doors, this time this game does do that and hides some of it through a long side quest and at one particularly egregious point, through a massive cache gate. Damn. This pretty much means that all the best equipment can't be picked up until near the final battle, and unlike Kingsfield 1, the final area is nowhere near as hard to justify it. The final boss, however, does justify it and is that hard, so you should probably get it all anyways. But the most egregious thing in this game is that you can get permanently stuck in areas. Yeah, you remember those gates I told you about? Well, there are certain areas in this game that, without those gates or without the MP to use them, you will be permanently stuck with no way to free yourself until you load a save. That's pretty fucking aggressive shit hauling, and the only true paddling I can give this game so far. That's just straight up malicious! And the thing is, unless there's lava underneath you, there's no true bottomless pit in this game, minus the big mine. So you'll want to throw yourself off of everything once you have the HP to survive it, just to get rare goodies like the aforementioned Shinden. But there'll be often no way up once you do, so you better make sure you at least always have 10 MP or some way to refill it, otherwise all your progress since you saved is null and void. And to make it worse, sometimes it can be something amazing like a new crystal to teach you healing magic or a rare magical item. Or sometimes it can be a piece of Verdite or straight up nothing, and you wouldn't know until you threw yourself off the cliff. Thanks, game! Thankfully, nothing of plot importance is stored behind any of these traps. The only thing that will be slightly challenging is a path to the ending that has a combination for a late game area, and you need 2 keys to get inside it. That's it. The other thing that makes up for the challenge is the brand new and improved bosses. Yes, Kingsfield 2 has many more bosses than the first game, and they all come in great supply. Some are good and challenging, some are not. The first boss, the Termite Queen, isn't actually challenging herself. All she does is sit there and attack if you get close. It's all the paralysis-inducing bitches around her that keep spawning. But luckily you can abuse the AI lack of ability to leave this room and just snipe at her like... oh. She's dead. The Super Kraken from earlier is pretty much the exact same thing, except he can you into a watery grave. So again, stand at a distance and... Most of the bosses were pretty much bigger, tougher enemies, so I didn't even realize they were a boss at first. Like the Big Magi. I legit didn't even notice he was a boss until he came back for the finale. All in all, they aren't a terrible collection of foes, and they can all seriously make you taste pain if you approach them stupidly, but they're not amazing either. However, the big bad hyped boss, Necron, is seriously no joke. Not only do you have to take down a boss rush, including a brand new and improved devil boss, but you'll need to do it all in one go. If you teleport out to heal up for him, you'll need to do the whole rush all over again. Necron himself will take a ton of punishment and has an unavoidable attack if you get far enough away. He'll do it if you get close too, but you can hit him to try and make him think twice, meaning that you're locked up and close with a duel with a man with an axe arm. Of course, he's not the final boss, but I'm not gonna show it this time. I guess all that's left is the level design, and for the most part, there's nothing too insane once you figure out all the game's little quirks. Sometimes an impassable area may just need you to take a Soulslike sphincter tightening running jump. Sometimes you need to jump off a high ledge to complete your objective. Sometimes you just need to find a certain key out of the 5 that you're given. For the most part, I never got lost except for the Cave of Fire, which is one big circle, and that threw me for a loop. The secret areas weren't too egregious. I do know that I had to look up the solution for only a single puzzle, not because I didn't know the solution, but because I didn't write it down, so I was a bit confused and the layout was weird and da-da-da-da-da. Honestly, for the most part, I really do like the level design. It can lead to some really cool organic moments. For one part of the game, I was exploring the deceased King Harvite's castle. In the main hall, there are these statues that shoot fire at you. Now, they're easy to outrun and they're kind of a pain to kill, so I ran up, collected everything I can, and then bolted into the last room of the castle. I interact with the only thing there, a painting of a king who claims I'm the intruder, and the walls open to release 4 copper knights who are pretty much mini-bosses. boxes. So of course I panic and try to run out to the only free space, which is currently being taken up by the fireball-tossing lunatics outside. It put me between quite the tricky rock and a hard place. I could either deal with the statues and door fight the knights, or I could try to hold my own in that room. Either way, I'm going to get hit a lot and use a lot of supplies. And this could have been entirely avoided if I had taken care of the statues earlier. It didn't feel unfair or cheap, it felt like I was being punished for not paying attention and taking care of business when it first arrived, and for panicking. Now for all the praising I did, there are moments of pure bullshit, like the holes you can get lost in. There was one time progression was locked behind a trapdoor that led to the first proper dungeon, the termite's nest, and whenever there were swinging axe or mace traps, you kinda just had to hope you had enough HP to survive the first hit, or maybe two. There are a lot of areas in this game where you can't get behind them or disable them without running through them the first time, and there's a lot you can never disable, meaning that you'll just need to hope you can survive. One particularly annoying part was a chest at the end of 3 swing traps and a bunch of skeletons guarding it, so you had to try and take care of the hard boners while not trying to get shafted from behind by the axes and not be giving a buggering from the front ones. And also there's nothing down that hallway, just some gold and dragon tree fruit, which yeah is in rare supply, but you really have no reason to use it anymore either due to the decreased difficulty.
Why are you here, tree? What are you doing here? What is your purpose, tree? Why are there more than one of you?
Oh, you get free dragon tree fruit. Sick! Yeah, that's all I can really talk about. In all honesty, Kingsfield 2 just takes what Kingsfield 1 did and does it better across the board. There's no reason to get back into all the deep minutiae of all the detail because most of it is recognizable from the first game. It's still a big old clunk fest and I don't see that changing anytime soon. It has quite the interesting background story, but I don't know if it's canonical. It has more sensible controls. I feel like I enjoyed the combat more, but it's got some major issues. The level design this time I think is much more outright malicious and relies on a few gotcha traps that are really mean-spirited in a goddamn RPG. Your stamina runs out way too fast, and the game box is a lie! A lie! You know the Moonlight Sword? You will never wield it in this game, because it's placed right behind the final boss.
How dare you, Kingsfield 2! What's that for the—
However, in stark contrast to the last video, I would actually recommend Kingsfield 2 or Kingsfield USA to anyone who's interested in clunky, classic dungeon crawlers, early PS1 games, or From Software fans. Yeah, it's clunky, dated, and really slow, but it's clunky, dated, slow, and charming, unlike Kingsfield 1. It's balanced, it has a really good atmosphere that I think never goes away, and sets the foundation for some of the greatest games of all time, From Software or not. Yeah, Kingsfield was not an isolated incident either, and was probably very much a necessary step for getting games like Medal of Honor onto the PS1. Someone had to show everyone else a 3D first-person game on a console was possible, and the only question I have now is, where can the franchise go from here? This is far from FromSoft's last year on the PS1, and while I'm sure we'll see more from this franchise in particular, I don't think there'll be as big a leap from Kingsfield 1 to 2, and I think we'll need to wait for the PS2 area for technology and FromSoft's ambition to truly clash together in perfect harmony. But I guess we'll figure that out when the time comes. The last of the PS1 Kingsfields await. Will we return to Verdite, or will we go somewhere new? Will we play Jean or Alexander? Will we actually have a face? This is From Software talking about here, probably not.